Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. Peace be upon you and the mercy of God and his blessings. Good morning, friends. I'm your brother, Adeyinka Muhammad Mendes, and this is a continuation of our this really precious course that I benefited from tremendously, Rising with Rumi in Ramadan. Rising with Rumi in Ramadan. I hope you're all well. I hope that you had some rest, and I hope that your families are healthy and that your families are safe. MashaAllah. Today, we're continuing with the theme of knowing your enemies, or as I like to call them, knowing the obstacles on the path. Knowing the obstacles on the path. And today, we're actually talking about the devil, or Iblis. May God curse him and protect us from him. And the curse of God means may he be distanced. May he be distanced from our presence. May he be distanced from the presence of God. And so this is a traditional Muslim prayer that's again based on the Quran. La'natullah alayh wa na'udhu billahi minhu. May God curse him, meaning may God cast him out of the divine grace. That's what it means. Al-bu'd min rahmatillah. And as I think you've seen over the past couple weeks, the Rumi that we're meeting in this treasury that Dr. Muhammad Isa Whaley put together is a very different Rumi that you see on the memes that are on the internet. It's a different Rumi that you find in the works of a lot of the popular translations. Those translations do capture something of the essence of Maulana. May Allah have mercy upon him, but it's definitely not a complete picture. It doesn't have the depth. This Rumi, you could say, has teeth. And there's a Jamali aspect, of course, and Rumi is always celebrated, for the outpouring, the just generous, gracious outpouring of divine love and love for human beings and love for all of Allah's creatures. And that is something that a lot of the popular translations have continued to capture. But the Rumi of struggle against the soul, against the ego, the Rumi of devotion to God and to Prophet Muhammad, God bless him and grant him peace, the Rumi of justice, the Rumi who calls out oppressors, as Andrew Harvey mentions in his translations. A lot of times you don't come into contact with that Rumi. And so with that being said, let us continue. Let's continue with our journey. Dr. Whaley, he titles this section, The Envious Enemy. The envious enemy, the jealous enemy. And as I mentioned, it's about our avowed enemy, Shaitan, as he's called in Arabic. The word Shaitan is the root of the word Satan. And Shaitan, again, has the meaning of being distant. Shaitan is related to a verb, shatana. Shatana is the same as ba'uda, which means to be far away. Far away from what? Far away from the grace of God, far away from paradise, from the garden, from heaven, far away from the mercy of God. And that pattern in Arabic, the sheen and the ta, you'll find it with words like shatata, right, to be in manifest error. Shati, which is the shore of a beach, right, the shore of a beach. It's also used for the word for spice, shatta, right? If any of you have been, to get a gyro or falafel, and you know, the guy making your sandwich might ask you, do you want shatta, right? Shatta, do you want some spice? And so what do all these have in common? This root, the sheen and the ta, as the first two consonants, they have this idea of extremes, of going to an extreme. And, you know, the word for lowering a bucket to the bottom of a river, for example, also has the same two letters at the beginning. And so Satan, shaitan, has gone far away to a dangerous extreme in his distrust of God, his disloyalty to God, and his enmity towards human beings. And this is something you have to understand. He hates human beings. Right? Satan hates human beings, right? And just like in the wild, everything has its own natural predator. Our natural predator is shaitan. Right? He's the one who's looking to, in a sense, devour us, right? And so we ask for God's protection. So let's read. We're reading from the words of Maulana first. And Maulana Jalaluddin, Rahmatullah. This one is like Iblis. From pride and conformity, he disdains. To acclaim him, he says, God is enough for me to prostrate to. Right? So he starts off with the name of Satan, Iblis. Right? Iblis is how we're first introduced to him in the Quran. And Iblis, as some of you may already know, is from a verb in Arabic, ablasa, which means to despair. So this already tells you about the psychological profile of Satan, right? He is someone who has despaired of hope in God's mercy. And this is kind of, you know, this is actually what compels him to take the course that he does. There are other names mentioned for Iblis, like Azazil, right? There was a movie back in the day with Denzel Washington where there was a demon called Azazel, right? So this is one of the names also that some scholars, even some Muslim scholars, say that Iblis has. So it's later that after he declares war against human beings and rejects God's command, that he's called Satan or Shaitan. Na'udhu billahi min. And so, and what are his problems here? Pride and conformity. So he says, this one is like Iblis, right? So who is he talking about? Who's the this one? This one is like Iblis. From pride and conformity, he disdains. So he begins by teaching us that there are these two qualities that the devil that's inside of us, the demons that's inside of us, the shaitan that's inside of us is attributed with pride, arrogance. Right? What is arrogance? Arrogance is to think that you are better than others, right? To think that you are superior to others. So at the root of racism, at the root of sexism, classism, militarism, ageism, and so many isms, bigotry and prejudice is this spiritual disease that really is a satanic quality. And that's why people who have these qualities do such monstrous acts, like our brother Ahmed Arbery. May God grant him the best of what he grants those who die in his state, from his grace and from his mercy, who was brutally murdered a couple months ago, right? Almost 3 months ago now, in broad daylight by two devils in human form, right? Two white American racists. It's arrogance, right? That is at the root of this, that drives people to do these evil, satanic acts. So pride and taqlid. So the Farsi says taqlid, which is conformity. Yes, again, I'm no expert in Persian, but in Arabic, taqlid is to follow an authority without understanding the underlying principles that authority is necessarily using, right? Or maybe you understand the principles, but you defer to that authority. Dr. Whaley translates it as conformity, and he is an expert in Persian. Yes, exactly. The movie Fallen. Time is on my side. Yes, it is. Right. The arrogant song of Azazel, the movie. Yeah, thank you, my brother. Exactly. That's the movie. Thank you. And it shows you how, these screenwriters and directors, producers, they do their homework, right? And on these movies, right? A lot of people may not know that is a name for the devil, but that's the name that's used in the movie. And so pride and not wanting to conform to qualified authority. All right, taqlid, to make taqlid are two attributes of Satan. And he says, God is enough for me to prostrate to. So what's this in response to? Maulana Rumi is drawing a scenario where God has created Adam, right? He's created Adam, and our narrations in Muslim tradition say that when God created Adam, our ancestor, peace be upon him, and this is when Adam was male, masculine, and feminine. This is before a woman was brought out of Adam, right? This is the original human, right? The original human. Alayhi, peace and blessings be upon him. And the narrations we have say that for 40 years, Satan examined Adam, who was at that time a lifeless form of clay and all the things that went into him. At this point, the spirit had not been breathed into him. And he examined him thoroughly from every angle, every orifice. And the narrations say that after this thorough 40-year examination of Adam, of Prophet Adam, peace be upon him, he said, this thing is hollow. Right? That's what, so he's talking about us by extension. Right? This thing is hollow. It's empty. And he, at that point, makes a decision. If this thing is given authority over me, if I'm given authority over this thing here, talking about the human, I'll destroy him. Right? And if he's given authority over me, I will rebel. If that's not prejudice, what is prejudice, right? He doesn't even know him, or he thinks he does, right? He thinks he does. Now, between that event and God's command to the angels, and even though Iblis is not an angel, we don't believe, like the Christians, for example, that he's a fallen angel. We believe that he is of a different species of creature entirely, which is the jinn, right? The jinn. And unlike angels, the jinn are not, the jinn have free will. Like human beings, they are not made of light. The angels are made of pure light, whereas the jinn are made of smokeless fire, right? Smokeless fire. So God breathes the spirit, places the spirit the ruh into Prophet Adam. And some of the commentators say that Iblis, he missed this. He missed it. It's so subtle. So subtle. And when God commands the angels, and he had worked his way up the ranks, and we'll be reading about this in a moment. He worked his way up to the ranks of the spiritual ranks as a jinn, such that he was in the assembly of the angels. And the command comes, prostrate. Usjudu li Adam, prostrate for Adam. And he refuses, right? He refuses God's command. And this is part of his reasoning. The devil, Iblis, God protect us from him, is very rational. You must understand this. He is very rational. And it shows the limits of reason. So a divine command comes, and then now he justifies why he's not going to prostrate to this creature, this new creature, Adam. He says, I only prostrate to God, right? Which he's using the language of religion, of piety, of Puritanism. You could, and so this is an extremist impulse, right? He's using the language of religion to actually disobey God. God is enough for me to prostrate to. I don't need to prostrate to anyone else, right? But God's the one who commanded you to prostrate. So Adam, in this story now, Adam replies to him. This prostration's intended for him, right, with a capital H. You squint and see double because you strayed and disbelieved. So Adam responds here. This prostration is not for me. It's similar to how we prostrate towards the cube, the sacred cube in Mecca, the Kaaba in Arabic, right? We prostrate towards the sacred cube. That is the original place of human worship, the first place established for the worship of God on earth, according to Muslim tradition. Not worshiping it, we don't worship it. It's an orientation, right? It's an orientation, a divine orientation, right? To connect us, of course, with that spot, which is the origin, okay, of the earth, according to our traditions. And not only that, it's directly below different sacred shrines in each heaven, right? Going all the way from the first heaven, where there's what's called the Bayt al-Izzah, the shrine or the house of majesty, all the way up to the seventh heaven, and which is what's called Bayt al-Ma'mur, or the populated house, or the oft visited house that Prophet Muhammad, God bless him, saw during his miraculous night journey and ascension. He saw Prophet Abraham, his spirit leaning back on it with the spirits of the children of those Muslims and believers who had passed away in infancy and childhood or stillbirths. So he's their foster parent, right? What a foster parent to have, right? Prophet Abraham. So this is to give solace and consolation to those who lose their children in childhood, or have stillbirths or premature births where the infant doesn't survive. And then Prophet Muhammad, God bless him and grant him peace, says that 70,000 angels, light beings of light and power, enter this Bayt al-Ma'mur, this house, every day. And they visit it, which is their pilgrimage, so to speak, and then they leave and they never return. And some scholars say, well, what the narrations are indicating is that they enter the house and they never come out, right? So there's basically two commentaries on the hadith, on the narration. One, that they go visit it and then they leave and they never come back ever again. So similar like making Hajj once in your life. or they enter the house and they never return. And so the Kaaba orients us towards this place, that what's above this oft visited or most populated populous home, this shrine, Beit al-Ma'mur, is what? The throne of God. And so the Kaaba is giving us an orientation to the spot on the earth that's directly underneath the throne of God, the Arsh of God. So that what? So that we can have an orientation towards that, and so that also we can find that within our own hearts. Within our own hearts. And our scholars, our great spiritual masters, have mentioned that all of these realities, all of these different houses, the Kaaba is inside you, Beit al-Izzah is inside you, Beit al-Ma'mur is inside you, and there's a place inside you that corresponds also to the throne of God, the majestic throne of God. And this is really what the spiritual path helps us to become conscious of, that everything outside of us in the cosmos, in this physical and the spiritual cosmos, is also inside of us, folded up inside of us. Right? We are the microcosm and the macrocosm. So Satan strayed away and he disbelieved. Let's continue. The dust of saying how and why brought down a barrier between the envious one's eyes and the star of good fortune. So his questioning, how, should I prostrate, and how is this possible that someone like me, who's made of fire, should be prostrating to clay when I'm clearly superior to him? I know more than him. I've lived a lot longer than him. I have a higher rank than him, and he's being given a responsibility, the vicegerency, the khilafa, the representation of God that I wanted, right? So all of these questions, how and why, and they bring a veil that covers and bars him from good fortune, from the blessings of God. The star of good fortune says, go away. May you become even more veiled, bereft of my company and also of the divine presence. Many questions and answers are contained within that veil. Have you not seen the way Abraham was veiled from Nimrod? Oh God, what a strong barrier is envy between friends. Yesterday, they were a single soul. Today, they're wild wolves. So now he's talking about jealousy and how that is also at the root of what made Iblis do what he did. What is envy? Envy is to see that someone has a blessing, and it could be anything. It could be a blessing of knowledge. It could be a blessing of beauty and handsomeness. It could be a blessing of wealth, a blessing of faith. It could be a blessing of a family, that maybe they have a wonderful spouse and, amazing children. It could be a blessing of influence and power, a blessing of health, right? And many other attributes. And so the envious person sees that someone has a blessing, some attribute, a positive attribute, and then they want the person to lose it. They hate the fact that they have that blessing. It just, kills them inside that they have that blessing, and they want them to lose it so that they can have it. That is what's called hasad, or envy, right? And the person who's envious, they don't understand, number one, that their jealousy doesn't hurt the person, first of all, doesn't harm the person. Secondly, they don't understand that there's God's grace and God's wealth, God's kingdom is vast enough that each person, like Prophet Muhammad, God bless him, said, every human being and every jinn being could ask for their heart's delight. And God would could give each person exactly what they wanted, the way they asked for it, and it would not decrease God's kingdom one iota. It would not decrease God's kingdom more than if you took a needle and you dipped it into an ocean and then brought the needle out of the ocean. That's how much God's kingdom would be decreased if every human who's ever lived and every jinn who's ever lived asked for their heart's delight. Right? The envious person doesn't understand this. Yeah. So an envy can take a relationship, a friendship, a brotherhood, a sisterhood, and completely ruin it. So now they become, he says, wild wolves, like predators, right? Not both of the people, but whoever's envious in that relationship. They become like a wolf towards the other person. They're looking for their destruction. They now delight in any misfortune or any test or trial that happens to that person. And it's just really, it's a very poisonous state to be in. May God protect our hearts from envy. And so what you're seeing now is what Rumi's also teaching us implicitly is that all the worst human vices are manifest in Iblis, right? Pride, arrogance. Again, racism and sexism and classism, things that we're dealing with on a daily basis, militarism, all of these are at the root of it is a spiritual disease, arrogance. And it doesn't matter how much legislation you pass. It doesn't matter how much, how much sensitivity training and diversity training you offer, employees, and if you're not dealing with the spiritual disease of arrogance, racism and bigotry and prejudice, racial and otherwise, will not go away. Sexism will not go away. Classism will not go away. You have to treat it at the heart level, right? But its root comes from who? Iblis. Envy, right? Envy is another one, right? Comes from Iblis. It's a spiritual disease. Conceit, as we're going to see later on, comes from Iblis. Showing off comes from Iblis. And then rage, self-serving rage and self-serving anger come from Iblis, right? What a barrier. Before that barrier came to exist, Iblis, prostrating, would traverse the roof of skies and earth. Right, yeah, this is something, again, you see in the commentaries. So Iblis has lived a long time. And we're blessed in this month of Ramadan that he is shackled, right? He is locked up. We are protected from him in this month of Ramadan. That's one of the reasons why it is such a blessed, blessed time. And it's one of the reasons why this is the month of revelation. A lot of times we talk about how the Quran was revealed in Ramadan, and but we don't talk about the fact, and there's a sound hadith from Prophet Muhammad about this, God bless him and grant him peace. It's not only the Quran that was revealed in Ramadan, the scriptures, all the revelations were revealed in Ramadan. The scriptures of Abraham and the Torah and the Injil, the Torah that was revealed to Moses was revealed in Ramadan. The Psalms, the Zabur that was revealed to Prophet David, King David, peace be upon him, was revealed in the month of Ramadan. The Evangel or the Injil was revealed to Jesus Christ, the Son of Mary. Peace and blessings be upon all of them, right? In the month of Ramadan. So this is the month of revelation. And it's not, don't think it's, by accident that it's also the month when God shackles the devils. Because what the devils try to do is they try to play interference with divine revelation and inspiration to human beings, right? So they're shackled up, and that begins the initial revelations to these great prophets, right? Who, like the Prophet ﷺ, for many of them, this is happening for the first time. They're not sure what's going on, and so the barring satanic influence and whispering in that experience is really important. Is really important. So he used to prostrate. In fact, the scholars of tafsir mention, the scholars of Quranic commentary mention that there is not, listen to this, there is not a handspan on land of this planet or in the sea or in the oceans, except that Iblis prostrated to God, right, on it. And some commentators mention that he did this for 40,000 years. He worshiped God nonstop for 40,000 years. Every place. He knows the earth. He knows this land. And he and his minions, they love the earth. As I've said earlier in an earlier class, this is the jewel, right? This is the jewel of the universe, of the physical universe, that is. So he loves this planet. This is the planet where you can experience this, the soul can experience all kinds of delights that cannot be experienced in other parts of the universe. And he took this worship, we later find out, was polluted. It was not sincere. So he was very pious. And again, this is a warning to those of us who think that our acts of worship, our acts of piety somehow make us better than others, that our religiosity, our outward, our thobe or our headscarf, our beard, or, how many prayers we do, our fasting Ramadan makes us better, than others, that we validate ourselves. Our worth, our value comes through these acts. And this is, again, a satanic impulse. This was his mistake, right? This was his mistake. What a barrier. Before that barrier came to exist, Iblis, prostrating, would traverse the roof of the skies and the earth. He would fly and go, and with joy, enthusiasm, tenderness, and neediness, and communing with God in many ways, affection grew. Right? This was his relationship with God. Right? He would commune with God. He grew in affection. So if that can happen to Iblis, right, we should be careful. Again, never be deluded at how close you think you are to God. Right? Don't let that be a barrier to you ever obeying God. Right? To heeding his commands and the commands of his prophets and his messengers and their inheritors from among the sages and the saints that live with us today. The veil of envy has turned him into an ass on ice. This is classic Maulana Rumi, right? His envy turned into a donkey on ice, right? An ass on ice. If you can imagine the image of a donkey trying to gain some footing on, a sheet of ice, right? It's hilarious. The filth of all that evil has tainted his wings and feathers. God drove him from the heavens mosque. Begone, you are unclean. What made him unclean? His qualities, his character. His character made him unclean. And that which is unclean cannot be in paradise, right? So this touches on what we discussed yesterday about purifying the heart. Once you purify the heart, you enter the kingdom of God. You are entered into the kingdom of God, even if you're not physically dead yet. what the great scholar Habib Ahmed Mashur Haddad and many others have called the garden of gnosis, or Jannatul Irfan, or the heaven of gnosis, the paradise of knowing God. Once our hearts are purified of these satanic qualities and their branches, but these are the roots, right? Arrogance, pride, conceit, envy, showing off, right? Iblis, he worshiped God for 40,000 years on every inch of the planet, every inch of the land and the sea, but it was for showing off, right? It was ostentatious, it was insincere. And, the more we purify, the more we get to taste something of the delights of the garden, right? As the last poets used to say. May Allah have mercy on them, right? The delights of the garden. That's an amazing poem, an amazing song if you like spoken word poetry. It's all about paradise, all about Jannah by some of the original rappers. So the veil of envy has turned him into an ass on ice. The filth, and by the way, ass is, it means donkey. It's not a curse word. I know some of you may have taken offense to that, so I apologize, but I'm really just reading what's here. But here means donkey. So, the filth of all that evil has tainted his wings and feathers. God drove him from the heavens mosque, the mosque of the heavens. Be gone, you are unclean. He did not heed the message, but rather he refined his uncleanliness. He doubled down. He doubled down, saying, why should I leave? What proof? Right? What have I done? Right? What is the cause? Let us discuss the matter. Unique and most loving Lord. Right? Classic denial. Classic denial. Right? Now, of course, Rumi here is not quoting directly from the Quran. He's not quoting directly from a hadith, but he's giving the meanings of this conversation. So again, I'm be careful about being too literal. Like, where is he getting this from, and where is he getting that from? And he's telling a parable. He's telling a story. And this is, again, the satanic or the demonic rationale and the defense. So Iblis went very defensive, and instead of heeding God's command, he says, but what did I do? Right? What did I do wrong? Right? And you see human beings. I mean, you see human beings saying the same thing verbatim, actually. If there is evil, Imam Rumi writes, if there is evil, so he's quoting Satan. If there's evil, it is you who did it, right? With the capital U. So now Satan, Iblis is talking to God, talking to Allah, the creator, the divine truth, the reality. If there's evil, it is you who did it. Every act is yours, right? So now he's using a theological argument, right? He's using Aqidah. Iblis knows Aqidah, right? He knows theology through and through. And that's why Imam al-Ghazali and Imam al-Rumi and so many other scholars will tell you, theology cannot grant you true knowledge of God. Studying Aqidah, you can study all the text of Aqidah you want to an advanced level, Johara, Bahru Kalam, Idat al-Junnah, and all these amazing works of theology, but they can't give you true knowledge of God. Iblis didn't have it, even with all of his powerful, theological, well, seemingly powerful, right, to him, seemingly powerful theological arguments. He says, if there's evil, it is you who did it. Every act is yours. The deviance of idolatry and of Christians and Jews, right? It's, You created these people and you created their misguidance. So we're not to blame, right? So he's doing something really dangerous here, right? And again, it's something you hear human beings doing. It's quoted in the Quran. If God had wanted, I would have been guided, right? The thing is, you have free will. You have a choice. And God has told you not to do this, not to believe this. You made me go astray. So now it's blame. And again, those of you who studied psychology, or you might be counselors or therapists or psychologists, you know these stages, right? And now he goes into blaming and projecting, right? You made me go astray. And it was you who wished it so, right? So what's next now? Resentment, right? You made me go astray, and everything happens in the universe through your will. So you wanted me to go astray. So now it's just, again, no responsibility. He's not owning anything. He's not owning his envy and his jealousy, his pride, and just deflection, complete deflection, denial, and now projection that will ultimately lead to resentment and hatred. And I don't even think hatred does justice to what he feels towards God and what he feels towards the children of Adam, peace be upon him. I'll make it so that you can't find one man worthy of praise, right? And this, of course, Maulana doesn't choose words haphazardly, right? So he uses the word worthy of praise, which is the word Mahmud, which of course shares the same root of the name of the Prophet Muhammad Mahmud. God bless him and grant him peace. Also, Mahmud is one of the attributes of Prophet Muhammad. God bless him and grant him peace. Mahmud means the one who is worthy, the one who is praised, and the one who is thanked, right? Muhammad means the one who is praised and thanked often and frequently, right? And so this is an indirect reference that Iblis is claiming you won't even be able to find one human being who's worthy of praise and thanks. And of course, we know that Prophet Muhammad, God bless him and grant him peace, is the proof against him. Right. Another important insight here is that Iblis is not the opponent of God. Like we're not, again, we live in a Judeo-Christian world, especially us here in the West. And in the Judeo-Christian tradition, Satan is generally seen as God's enemy, right? As God's opponent, as God's rival. But the Quran does not present him as such. Prophet Muhammad, God bless him, does not present him as such. And Rumi doesn't either. God has no rival. No one can rival God. God has no opponent. Everything and everyone is a slave of God. And Iblis knows it, right? And that's why in the Quranic story, he goes on to ask God for respite, right? Like, give me some time. Like, give me some time. I will show you, right? I'll show you that these human beings are not worthy of the spirit, rather of the rank, because some scholars say that one of the reasons why he refused to bow, to prostrate rather, to Adam was because he thought he was still just clay. That's why he said, I'm better than him. I'm better than him. Again, this is classic satanic logic and language. I am better than him. You made me from fire. You made him from clay. Okay? I'm better than him. You made him, you made me white. You made him black. I'm better than him. You made me rich and you made her poor, right? I'm better than her. You made me rich and you made her poor. I'm better than her. You made her, you know, uh, you made me a man and you made her a woman, right? Like this is again satanic logic and satanic language, right? And what's under all of this is, his own insecurities. Now, who told you fire is better than clay? Like, where did that come from? Based on what? Right? Fire is very powerful, right? It rages, it devours. If you channel it and you control it, you can use it, for warmth. You can use it to cook things. You can use it to purify things, right? But clay is cool. It's you can build things with clay, right? You can build things with clay, right? What do you build with fire? You can shape clay. You can mold clay, right? Fire can't be shaped and molded, right? So there's certain all of the potentialities of the divine names can be expressed through clay. Right? Can't do that through fire. So he missed the spirit, according to some commentators, being blown into Adam. And it is that spirit, like a friend of mine yesterday, I read on his Facebook page, Aaron Sellers, who many of you know. He is the audiovisual man for Zaytuna College, and he's on the DL, on the down low. He's a brilliant songwriter, musician, and poet, but most people don't know him as that. And I pray that one day he just, comes out of the closet. He's the kind of person, mashallah, a lot of people would be inspired, by his lyrics and as well as his music. He used to be in a rock and roll band before he became Muslim with Khalil Moore. Some of you might remember Ustad Khalil Moore, who used to translate for Habib Omar and Habib Ali Jifri. Allah preserve him. So they were in a band together. So this is what Aaron Sellers wrote yesterday, and it's appropriate to what we're talking about. He wrote, "To what were the angels commanded to bow? Surely not Adam's color of skin, for that will be the feast of maggots. Esteem is for the spirit within. Be pleased if God made you brown. Be pleased if any shade fainter, but hold no hue over another, for you were not its painter." Yeah, so that's his reflection on the Quran, Surah 30, Ayah 22, and the Quran, Surah 49, Ayah 13, right? MashaAllah. So that's, again, the spirit here. And this is from the Daftar, the second Daftar. I'm sorry, the Diwan. The Diwan, the anthology, Maulana Rumi's anthology, pages 211 to 212, and from his Ghazal, 914, right? Which is a poem, lyrical poem. And Dr. Whaley says, may God preserve him and benefit us through him, learned, cunning, and relentless. Our manifest foe, or Aduwwul Mubin, as God refers to him in the Quran, chapter 36, ayah 60, and other places. Our manifest foe does his best to make himself inconspicuous in order to carry out his work with maximum effectiveness. The word adu in Arabic means literally to flee from someone. And so God says he's your manifest enemy your adu, and so take him treat him as an enemy, right? Don't befriend Satan. And befriending Satan doesn't, a lot of people think of that as, well, that means you join the Church of Satan or you become a Satanist, or, you know, or they think of people like, the musician Marilyn Manson, or, befriending Satan means acting like Satan. Right? That's how a person befriends Satan, by being arrogant, by being jealous, right? By not taking responsibility for your own shortcomings, by projecting, by denying, by disobeying God. That's how you become a friend of Satan. You might be, the Imam of a mosque, right, and be a friend of Satan. May Allah protect us from that. You might be the president or the chairman of a mosque board, or you might be a rabbi or a priest, or, go any religious leader and still be a friend of Satan if these are one's qualities. May Allah protect us from them. And Sheikh Ibrahim Inyas and Sheikh Ba Muhyiddin and others say, when you say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, when you make the prayer for protection from Satan, really at the core of what you're saying is not really, part of it, I'll say this, part of it is, it's asking God to protect you from Satan's whispering, right? From his suggestions. But also you're asking God to protect you from his characteristics. You should know this. That before you read the Quran, you look inside and you ask God, if there's any arrogance in here, if there's any envy in here, if there's any conceit in here, if there's any ostentation in here, if there's any anger that's for my own self-interest in here, or the interest of my people or my projects, that's not for your truth, then purify my heart of it. We're asking God to protect us from the qualities of shaitan. Ar-Rajim. Ar-Rajim means the one who is cast out, the outcast. That's what Ar-Rajim means, the outcast. What is he? He's been cast out from God's garden, from the garden of God, and from the mercy of God. In the present day, he has achieved such success, even among those who do believe in God. There appear to be many who barely recognize Satan's existence. In fact, many modern people, especially here in the West, don't even believe Satan exists. They don't believe God exists. For many of them, God is a joke, right? And they don't believe Satan exists, right? Except in movies, right? Horror movies, right? Or comedies, which is interesting. We live in a society where the unseen has been removed from our daily lives, except in our storytelling, right? In filmmaking, God and, other gods and, false gods and Greek god titans and, all of that is still very prominent. And, the demons and devils and jinn and monsters are still very prominent. So it tells you something about the human, right? The human being, right? Even though on one hand, we don't want that world to interfere with, progress, development. Still, there's this deep connection with these principles and these realities that come across in our storytelling. I've heard it said that Satan's greatest feat in our time is to convince people he doesn't exist, right? And so what happens when you get these thoughts, when a person gets these, hears these voices to do evil, or just to be arrogant, to be jealous, they think it's their thought, right? So they internalize it, they identify with it, and instead of knowing that this is not me, like this thought is not mine, God protect me from that. They can't do that, right? Because they don't think that there's any other influence that could be interfering. And Imam Ghazali and others talk about this, right? That our thoughts have 4 sources. We have some thoughts, and this also applies to our dreams. We have some thoughts and dreams that come from God. We have some thoughts and dreams that come from the angels, the light beings of light and power. There are some that are sent by God to serve us. We have some thoughts that come from Satan and his minions, right? Other demonic entities. And then we have some thoughts that come from the nafs that we've been talking a lot about, right, the past few days. We have some thoughts and dreams that come from our nafs, that come from the self, from the lower self, right? And there's ways to identify each of them, and there's a response to each of them. But these are the main four. Even Ibn Taymiyyah, Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, God have mercy upon him, he even mentions this in his writings. It is vital to understand that he has been around for long enough to know all about humanity's weak spots, and that he particularly relishes the challenge. Listen to it, he relishes, he takes absolute delight of luring people who are virtuous and or are interested in religion, who consequently face special dangers against which they may mistakenly feel secure. Well, I'm a Muslim. I'm a descendant of the Prophet ﷺ. I've been practicing Islam my whole life. I'm an Imam. I'm a scholar. I'm a this. I'm a that. You know, I donated money to the masjid, and you think you're secure. You know, and so he delights in tripping up people like that, and he does. He does all the time. All the time. You know, we have stories about, you know, religious leaders, priests, imams, rabbis molesting children, abusing women. You know, the Me Too movement has highlighted a lot of this. You know, taking advantage, sexually harassing and sexually assaulting women. You have imams, you know, watching pornography, and I mean, he loves this stuff. Satan loves, in his view, showing God these human beings are not worth the esteem and the rank you have given them, the honor. We talked about this before. Like, who are you? Who are we? لَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي Adam. God says, we have honored, we have ennobled the children of Adam. And so Satan's goal, one of his goals, is to humiliate human beings, right? And to show that you're not worth being the Khalifa of God, right? It was a waste, and that I'm justified in not bowing to you and not prostrating to you. Also, easy targets. Before I move on, it's not just humanity's weak spots he knows, but he knows your weak spots, right? So for some of us, you know, intoxicants and narcotics are our weakness, right? For whatever reason. Sometimes it's, you know, to deal with trauma. Sometimes it's because we have that kind of soul that's looking for euphoria. We're looking for bliss and happiness. Or sometimes we have that kind of soul that's looking for altered states of consciousness, like psychedelic drugs and things like that. But for other people, that's not an issue, right? It's not like you know, Trump, like, he doesn't drink alcohol. Like, that's not his problem. That's not his struggle. He has other issues. And may Allah guide him, and may Allah heal him, and may Allah rectify him and us. Another person, their issue may be, you know, addictions to gambling, right? And you know, they waste their money and their family's money on gambling and the lottery and whatnot. Another person, their problem is sex, right? They're addicted to it, or just they go through relationship after relationship, even if they stay married, right? Maybe they're not, you know, there's no infidelity, but they go through what's called serial monogamy, right? They're just, you know, so we all have our weak spots. For some people, it's anger. For other people, it's envy. For others, it's arrogance. And what Satan does is he knows you. He actually knows you better than you know yourself. Prophet Muhammad said God bless him, grant him peace, said that Satan touches every human being when they are born. And the only human beings that were protected from that touch of Satan were Mary, the Blessed Virgin Mary. And Rumi has a beautiful statement about her virginity, saying that don't think her virginity was just that she never had relations with men. Her virginity was that there was no love for the dunya in her heart. Anyone who has no love for the material world in their heart, it shares some degree of that virginity, that sacred virginity of Mary. That's why she's an example for all of us, men and women, right? And, you know, he knows you. And Allah protected Jesus from that as well, from being touched by Satan when he was born. And so he touched you. You know, who knows? Maybe before your own parents, your own father, your own mother, like held you, you know. He knows you. He knows your strengths, right? Where you're morally strong and consistent, but then he also knows your weaknesses. So don't feel secure. Never feel, no matter how much knowledge you get, no matter how religious or pious you get, no matter, you know, how much money you give away in charity, you know, how many meshes you build, or schools you build, or hospitals you build, don't think that he doesn't know your vulnerability. Also, easy targets are loners and or people full of sullen resentment and frustration, such as the quiet, reclusive type who inexplicably takes a gun and commits mass murder. This is one of the reasons why Prophet Muhammad, God bless him and grant him peace, encourages fellowship and community, because sometimes people who are loners, they spend time with their thoughts, and those thoughts, again, are not just coming from their self. They're thoughts from God, from the angels, and from Shaitan. And, you know, if you don't understand what's going on in your head and in your heart, you can start to believe. Those voices get louder and louder, especially the satanic ones. The angelic voices are very, very subtle, very gentle. But the satanic verses scream at you. They scream at you, and they're persistent. The angelic voices, when they whisper for you to do good, or, you know, if you don't heed it, they kind of fade away, right? Whereas the satanic voices, they keep coming at you, right? And so if you're alone and you don't have the benefit of good company, right, to help mitigate that, people to talk to, it could make a person vulnerable, is what he's saying. Satan even argues with God himself and has a line of argument ready for every human type. For the young and angry, for example, he says, and that's meaning he says through them, look, the Muslims everywhere are suffering. If you're a real believer and not a hypocrite, prove it. Go and kill some ordinary non-Muslims, some innocent non-Muslims. That's what they all deserve anyway. And then you'll go straight to paradise with the martyrs. Right? So he's talking about the radicalization of Muslims by terrorists and how that is a satanic impulse. For the well-intentioned person trying to improve their spiritual life, he whispers, he suggests, you're just a hypocrite, trying to be better than others so you can show off your piety. SubhanAllah. You're just a hypocrite, right? Again, to discourage and deflate. You are just a hypocrite trying to be better than others so you can show off your piety. Or he says through them or to them, can't you see what a mess you are? Can't you see what a mess you are? You'll never succeed. You'll never be among the righteous. You'll never be like a seeker. So why bother trying anyway? Like, why bother? Or in an attempt to make them fail by setting their sights too high, Is that the best you can do? That's pathetic. Right? And people replay these messages over and over and over in their head. And they think it's them, they internalize it, and they ultimately, what do they lead to? Despair. And God tells us in many places in the Quran, do not despair of God's mercy. Don't despair of God's grace. God created you to show you mercy. Your weakness is actually your opportunity, right? Rumi says the wound, the injury, is where the light comes in. Right? Your weakness is actually your strength as a human being. And God did not give us this rank of his Khalifa because we're perfect. You're not here to be perfect. And you hear Muslims talk like this, right? Or, you're not, you have to be flawless, right? A flawless, perfect, good Muslim. Where does it say that in the Quran? Where does it say that in the Hadith? God said, there's a Hadith, there's a narration that if you did not commit sins, meaning if you were flawless, as I've heard a number of Muslims say that we're supposed to be, if you were flawless, God would get rid of you. God would be done with you and would bring new creatures that would make mistakes, that would commit sins, so that he can forgive them. You're not here to be perfect, my dear brother and my dear sister, right? You are here to maybe strive for perfection, or rather strive for nobility and to be your, as they say, the best version of yourself. But don't be dejected and don't be in despair if you miss the mark, right? Because missing the mark really is an opportunity for God's grace to carry you. As-Samad, Allah's As-Samad, right? The one who helps you in your time of need. So we are needy creatures, we are weak creatures, and so on and so forth, depending on where our vulnerabilities lie. God be our refuge from Satan and his wiles. And that ends this section. So may God protect us from Satan. He is our enemy. And, when you talk about enemies in the Quran, he is the enemy. And again, I think I agree with that elder from Imam Warthidi Muhammad's community. May Allah preserve him, brother. Not brother Dan. His name is escaping me. Yeah, it may be not helpful to refer to the soul or to the self as our enemy, right? Or to even this world as our enemy, right? When you look at things through a Quranic lens, Satan is actually called our enemy, right? It's called our enemy, but the self isn't, and the world isn't called our enemy, right? And so we will stop there. Thank you for joining us. May God bless you all. Inshallah, we'll open up for questions, your questions and comments. Inshallah, if there are any. Yeah. Okay. Akhtar Bhai, thank you. Yeah. Taqleed in Urdu means to follow someone. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the same sense in which it's meant here, I'm sure, because Farsi is one of the languages that Urdu is made up of. Okay. There's a book called The Spirit of Prayer that has, I think it's from Imam al-Ghazali, where he talks about the tricks of Satan, that there's 7 tricks of Satan that he uses to trip up human beings, right? Among those tricks is that he gets you not to obey God. And if you do obey God, he gets you to be lazy and procrastinate in obeying God. Another trick is he gets you to think to yourself, how amazing or how marvelous my worship is, right? Which is basically what he said about himself, those 40,000 years plus that he was worshiping God. So he inspires conceit, which is one of the qualities that undermine your virtuous deeds. Another trick of Satan is that um, he inspires people to do good deeds in private, but with the ultimate goal that one day people would discover how amazing they are. Right? Like, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to slave away, and serve God, or work hard on this project or this invention or this business, and one day I'm going to be famous. Right? I'm going to get respect. I'm going to get credit. Right? That's another trick of Satan, to undermine our virtue and our virtuous deeds. Another trick is that he gets people to um, uh, say to think, uh, you know, why worship God, right? You know, God has decreed everything. If I'm going to heaven, then I'm going to heaven. I don't need to worship God to go to heaven. You can't get into heaven anyway, right? You can't get into heaven anyway by working your way into it. And if God's written me among the people of hell, then I'm going to hell. So what? What's the point? Why even try, right? So again, this is a mistake, right? Because the path to heaven is by doing heavenly deeds, right? We never ignore the means, and this is something he did, right? He blamed God, and this is really, you know, I don't want to talk about any particular group or event in human history, but when tragedies happen, traumas happen, the satanic impulse is to blame God, right? So God is responsible for this genocide. God is responsible for this oppression, and so on and so forth. So therefore, uh, you know, either God doesn't exist, right, which is one line of thinking, again, a satanic impulse. If there's all this suffering and evil, then there must not be a God. The other line of thinking is, since God is all powerful, if all the suffering and evils in the world, he must, be okay with it, because he definitely has the power to stop it. And therefore, if God doesn't care enough, why should I care? And so a lot of people become atheist or agnostic with this line of reasoning. May God protect us from it. And yeah, so those are some of the tricks of Satan. There's one more I want to share with you. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Hmm. Just one moment, please. It should be right here. Hmm. Mm, okay, I'm not seeing it in my files, but I'll look for it while I'm answering the other questions or looking at your comments. Okay. Bismillah. Okay. Okay, Bismillah. Salam alaikum, Queen Noor. Thank you. Powerful. Where can we find the ways to identify the four sources of thought? Okay, I could share that with you. Um, so as I said earlier, our thoughts, according to Imam al-Ghazali and Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah and other scholars, our thoughts and our dreams, right, which is really important. Our thoughts as well as our dreams come from four primary sources. Now you will find other scholars that, expand on this, right? And they mention other sources, but really they boil down to these four fundamental sources, which are sources from God. One source is from God himself, and those are dreams, and those are thoughts that are of two types. Number one, they inspire you with reverence for God, with love of God, with knowledge and acceptance of the oneness of God. And as a person who used to be Christian, right? I was raised in a Christian family, as I've told you before. I know what that means. I know what that's about, right? When I was blessed to, go to Jerusalem when I was in high school on a exchange, not an exchange program, it's more like an internship with the Mickey Leland kibbutz internship program. And, while I was in, Haifa and Tel Aviv and Beersheba and Negev and Jerusalem, I really felt called to this faith in oneness of God. I didn't feel called to Islam, right? I was attracted to the Muslims, but I was also attracted to the Jews at that point. But what was very clear to me was that I really felt a calling. This thought kept coming into my heart that God is one, and that my belief in the Trinity that I had been taught all my life, at that time I was 16 years old, that this doctrine of the Trinity had some very deep flaws and was very problematic, right? So where was that thought coming from, right? So this is an example of a thought that comes from God. Another thought that comes from God, and this might seem strange to us, is that, forgive me for lowering my head, I'm just looking for the document that I want to share here. The other thought that comes from God is a test regarding some sin that you've committed, right? And you've repented of the sin, right? You've repented of the sin, and God sends you a thought to commit the sin in order to test the sincerity of your repentance. And if you resist that thought, if you reject following through with that thought, then that sin no longer has any hold on you. You know how some people, they just keep repeating the same sin again and again, and they repent and they kind of recalibrate, realign, and they still are struggling and being challenged with that sin. That this is what it refers to, that God is giving you an opportunity to be done with it once and for all. And if you resist once and for all, then you won't be tested ever again. Like that's behind you, right? Doesn't mean you won't be tested in other things. It's like a video game, right? There's levels, right? And they say for every level there's a new devil, right? For every level there's another test, there's another trial, another tribulation. The higher you get, right, the more challenging, all right, the opposition from the shaitan and his minions are. And so those are thoughts that come from God. The second type of thought, so I found it here, I'll share it with you in a moment. So the second type of thought are thoughts that come from the angels, or dreams that come from the angels. And those dreams and those thoughts are always suggestions from the angels to do good, to do things that are virtuous, things that are compassionate, acts of service to others, without seeking, of course, any recognition, any accolades, any credit. And then the third kind of dream or thought comes from Satan. May God protect us from him. And the sign that a thought is from Satan. Okay, and also, I'm sorry, the sign that a thought is from the angels is that it comes very gently, and if you don't heed it, it leaves. You don't hear it anymore, right? You don't get that thought anymore. Now, if you heed the thoughts that come from the angels, then they give you more. And some of you, I'm sure, have experienced this. Like, you do one good deed, you do something that is helpful to another human being, and then you get another idea, right? You get another idea, you get another idea, then another one, right? So the more you heed the angels, the more they will supply you with inspiration and ideas to do good. And I'm not just talking about, walking an elderly person across the street or picking up trash. I'm talking about maybe even to start a business or a nonprofit or an NGO that addresses some major world issue that you uniquely are designed for. The angels will give you that thought to do that good thing. And the devils, their whisperings, their insinuations and suggestions are very strong. They're not like the angels. And when you resist them, they come even harder. Right? They're very persistent. They come at you. They're not like the angels in that regard, which is interesting because the angels are very powerful, but their suggestions are very gentle. And the demons, the devils, are very weak. God says in the Quran, the plotting and the schemes of Satan are weak. They are weak. Their reasoning is weak. Physically, the fire is weak, right? Water puts out fire. Earth puts out fire. Wind moves fire. They're weak, right? But their whisperings are strong and persistent. And that's one of the important, that's why it's so important to say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, or to say, A'udhu billahi samir alim minash shaitanir rajim, or Rabbi a'udhu bika min hamazati shayateen, wa a'udhu bika rabbi an yahdurun, or to say the prayer of the mother of Mary, the Blessed Mary, Hannah, inni u'idhuha bika wa dhurriyataha minash shaitanir rajim. I seek protection for her and her offspring from Satan, the outcast. Right? These are all different ways of getting God's summoning, invoking God's protection from these unseen satanic energies that are in us. Right? These are in us. Right? They're not just outside of us. These energies, satanic, demonic energies, Prophet Muhammad said they flow in the blood of human beings. They circulate with your blood. Don't think Satan is just some guy in a black suit with horns and a pitchfork, right? Like Hollywood wants you to think. No, these are energies that are in you. Satan is also a person. He's a personality, right? Iblis is a personality, but that personality is, always seeking to build a relationship with you. And your defense is your worship of God. Your defense is your excellent character, right? Your defense against Satan is remembrance of God, dhikrullah, like spending your days and nights saying La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, or Subhanallah, Walhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, Wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. or reciting Quran, or reciting any of the prayers and the invocations of that are in the Quran, or the Prophet Muhammad, God bless him, has shared and left for us as a legacy. Like, these are your force field. These are your weapons. This is your AK-17, your AR, 15. Like, this is your automatic, really against the devils, because all the other stuff, right, that people think keeps, like Hollywood, holy water and stuff like that, all that stuff, Satan laughs at that. Okay, we have real stuff, real weapons against Satan, and that's the dhikr of Allah. He hates remembrance of Allah, and so whenever you feel those persistent suggestions to disobey God, right, those come from Satan. That's how you recognize it, right? To disobey God. And even if you haven't studied the whole Quran, you kind of know, like, anything you know is wrong and evil and will hurt people or damage property, that's from Satan, right? And you need to resist it. And the way to resist it is not to use your mind, because that's what Satan's using. Your intellect will not help you against Satan. You cannot reason him out of, the way to combat him is through remembrance of Allah and taqwa, right? Holding fast to obedience and reverence for God. And then the last source of our thoughts and dreams is from our own nafs, our own self. And those are thoughts and dreams that have to do with your desires, that have to do with your ambitions, that have to do with your appetite for food or for drink or for sex. And, if you have a dream that you're, swimming in a bowl of your favorite cereal, like, that's from the nafs, right? That is from yourself. If you have a dream about what happened at the office, that day or a few days ago, a few months ago, if you have a dream about your family, all of that's from your nafs, and those aren't necessarily bad, right? But they're from the nafs, and also thoughts about, what am I going to eat right now? What am I going to drink right now? And so on and so forth, right? Those are from the nafs. Now, the thing about the nafs doesn't really care if you satisfy those drives, those appetites, in a way that's obedient to God, that's halal, or disobedient. Nafs doesn't care, right? It just wants to be satiated. It just wants to be satisfied. So if you're thirsty, the nafs doesn't care. You could, drink water, or, drink wine. Doesn't care, right? I don't know if people drink wine. I don't think people drink wine if they're thirsty, so that's probably a bad example. Another example is eating. Okay, let's use eating instead, right? Nafs doesn't care if you're eating pizza with, like a spinach Alfredo pizza, or if you're eating pizza with, pepperoni that's made from meat, pork or beef that has not been, slaughtered properly. Nafs doesn't care. It's just hungry, and it wants something delicious. It doesn't care, right? So our responsibility is to restrain our appetites so that we only fulfill them in a way that's pleasing to God, because ultimately that's what's better for our health and longevity and for our souls. And also to limit our soul's appetites from being fulfilled with that which God, with what is permissible, but in excess. Again, it's better for our health and better for our souls. And Ramadan is a training for that. And so those are the four major sources of our thoughts. And let me just share this with you all. These are, again, the 7 tricks of Satan. since we talked about Satan today, Iblis, so the one I didn't mention, yes. So he encourages people to hurry, all right, to rush in their acts of worship. All right, to hurry up, right? So you're praying, and it takes you 2 minutes to pray, right? All right. You don't like, oh, why is the Imam taking so long, right? The Imam took a whole 10 minutes to lead the prayer. You spend 3 hours at the movies, right? Or at a basketball game, or 5 hours, or if it's the Super Bowl. I mean, come on, right? But, taking 10 minutes to pray, I don't have time for that, right? And so you rush your acts of worship. You rush your Quran, you rush your prayers, you rush. And let's see. He also whispers arrogance and pride, saying, who can be greater and more precise than me in my obedience to God? This is another satanic impulse. Yeah, okay, so that's all of them. All right, so be careful about that, inshallah. All right, next private comment. Is there any way you can post the do's and don'ts of i'tikaf that you discussed yesterday? Also, you mentioned that you would post something about the intensive. Okay, yeah. So inshallah, we're going to put that on our website, and it will be in the resource link of our website. Okay, God willing. So just that, if it's not up today, it'll be there tomorrow. God willing, inshallah. Private message, but seek through that which Allah has given you the home of the hereafter, and yet do not forget your share of the world, and do good as Allah has done good to you, and desire not corruption in the land. Indeed, Allah does not love the corruptors. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's right from the Quran. And again, this ayah from the Quran is so beautiful. Every ayah is beautiful, and it is balanced, right? So look at what our brother shared with me. He says, seek what Allah has given you, the home of the hereafter. Like that's for you. Allah created you for paradise. That's your homeland. And that's why Allah made you, right? Not to send you to hell. And that's for every human being, not just for Muslims. God created human beings. And I want to say this. I was wondering if it was appropriate, but because some of you may take issue with this, but Rumi is among those Muslim scholars that believe that ultimately every human soul will be saved. Like, yes, that there are some people that will go to hell, but ultimately Allah's grace will outstrip his wrath, and that ultimately the ultimate destiny of humanity is their salvation. And that's all human beings. And that's and there are other scholars that share that with him. He's not alone. I want you to understand this. And I know that the mainstream Muslim teaching is that, Muslims and a few believers from other religions who didn't accept Islam or didn't hear about Islam, for example, not accountable, they're in paradise, but everyone else is going to hell. Rumi, again, based on his study, he was a Muslim scholar, right? He was a Muslim scholar. His position, and I don't recall what book it's in, but I do know this because I've talked about this I've heard this from other scholars, that, he believed that ultimately Allah Ta'ala's grace will reach every human being. And I think that's a very hopeful vision. Allah knows best. There's no unanimous opinion. There are actually a lot of Muslims are surprised when I tell them this. There's actually not a consensus among Muslim scholars about, how long human beings will be in the hellfire, even whether the hellfire will last forever. And I know a lot of modern people struggle with this reality of hell, and so I think it's just something that it's important to be aware of. that only God knows. Like really only God knows. So I'm not telling you to change whatever your belief is about who's going to hell. Really only God knows who's going to hell, because whether a person goes to hell depends on where their soul is when they die, right? What their soul, the state of their soul when they die. And only God knows that. You don't know that, right? Whatever they call themselves during their life isn't necessarily the reality of their soul at death, right? And so, but Rumi has a very, mashallah, he has a very hopeful outlook on the ultimate destiny of human beings. And I think that's relevant here. That, we are created for paradise, right? And then for him, ultimately, that's where human beings end up, inshallah. And Allah knows best, right? Again, I'm not telling you to change anything. I'm not saying that that's what Islam teaches. I'm not saying that. Don't start texting me afterwards, asking me why am I, I'm just sharing with you one position, and there are other positions of other scholars that are similar to his. Some are a little more nuanced, but I will say that the vast majority of Muslim scholars believe that those people who rejected God's truth, God's oneness, and rejected God's prophets and messengers, that they will dwell in hell forever. That's what the majority of Muslim scholars teach, right? That's the mainstream orthodox teaching. And yet, the ayah goes on to say, do not forget your share of the world. So yes, we're seeking the hereafter, we're striving for heaven, but we also, we're in this physical world, and we also strive here, we build here, we earn money, and we enjoy the pleasures of this life, right? That are, again, permissible, according to the Quran and the teachings of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's your share of this world. And do good to others as Allah has done good to you. Allah has given us all these blessings and we don't deserve it. So treat people nice, even when they don't deserve it, right? That's the point here. And don't desire corruption in the land, right? Don't cause, problems for the planet or for your fellow creatures on this planet. Allah does not love those. The mufsideen. Thank you for sharing that. Queen Noor writes, I recently saw a documentary on WOM, who has on women who has DID, on a woman who has DID and 2,500 souls inside of her, had me very contemplative. This class helped me with understanding the arrogance of horrific evil. But how do I reconcile the pain of the innocent child soul? You have to help me out. What does DID stand for? Yeah, you have to help me out. Oh, dissociation disorder. Oh, subhanAllah. Yeah, I mean, so this issue of, the presence of evil in the world, right, is a really tough one. And the basic, simple answer is, that innocent child that may have suffered, um, that innocent child that suffered, that what God has in store for them in the next life will far, 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 far outweigh any suffering they experience in this life. In fact, we have many ahadith, many narrations that, people who went through a lot of pain and suffering in this life, once God gives them a taste of the bliss of the hereafter, that they forget that pain and suffering. And so, I mean, ultimately, the issue of evil in the world, again, innocent people suffering evil, it can only be reconciled with a belief in the hereafter. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense, right? It's not fair, and that leads to despair, right? If we believe like many materialistic people believe that if we were to believe that, it's all random, it doesn't make sense, you know, life happens, innocent people suffer, and that's just the universe we live in. That leads to nihilism and and sometimes narcissism, right? Because then it's just about me making sure that I protect myself and my interest, my family, so that we're not a victim. Yeah, and my brother here, he cites an ayah 2877, chapter of the Quran, supporting that the world is not our enemy. Thank you for that. So there are some people who are labeled as schizophrenics who claim that God or the devil speaks to them. With medications, these voices go down or go away completely. Are psychiatrists correct in assuming that these voices are fabrications of the mind, or could these voices actually have merit to them? So I'm not qualified to answer that question. Um, I do think that you cannot separate the body completely from the mind, completely from the soul, right? And so, yes, I do think medications can influence what you can hear and what you cannot hear. There are neurological pathways that, if they're blocked, then the certain influences may be mitigated or eliminated. There was a documentary I watched a few months ago on psychedelics. Michael Pollan, the author of The Omnivore's Dilemma, has a book called Change Your Brain, I think it's called, or something like that. And, he went on the talk show circuit as well, talking about psychedelics. And this is a new kind of vista for psychiatrists to use psychedelic drugs as a therapy, right? So what they're talking about now is not people taking LSD or acid, for example, in their basement at home or in an alleyway somewhere, and getting a trip and um, getting some kind of altered state of consciousness. But they're talking about now proposing that people, and this is very controversial, but there's a group of psychiatrists that are pursuing this, and some religious leaders along with them, of actually having people go to their psychiatrist, lay down on the couch, and the psychiatrist gives them, some psychedelic drug, holds their hand, and guides them like a sheikh, right, like a spiritual guide, through what they start to see and what they start to hear, as a way of helping them with trauma. Like one woman on this documentary said she had been struggling with smoking for decades, for her whole life, until she was given this psychedelic drug in a controlled environment with her psychiatrist, and she hasn't smoked since then, right? It brought up trauma from her childhood. These things, these demons and these energies and the nafs it's real. And so people will see these images, and hear these voices. Some of the patients that have been given these kind of drugs, they'll see progress in whatever they're struggling with in life, for maybe a few months or a year, but then they have a relapse, right? So, and then there's side effects sometimes. And, if you want altered state of consciousness, like if any of you are watching or listening and you're looking for altered states of consciousness, other dimensions of perception, do dhikr, right? If you do enough dhikr and you purify your heart by being a virtuous person who selflessly serves others, and you cultivate faith in God, sooner or later, and the thing is, it's not like taking a psychedelic. Psychedelics are a quick fix, a shortcut. For many people, they're not long lasting. But dhikr, it takes more time. It might take months, it might take years, sometimes even decades. But if you're consistent in it, you will eventually be become conscious of these altered states of consciousness in a way that doesn't harm you, and in a way that is long lasting, and also in a way that is supported by character, like beautiful character, right? Taking psychedelics and stuff like that, you don't have to, discipline and rise, right? So that's part of the danger in that. So I don't know, I'm not really qualified. I'm not a psychiatrist. Yeah. So I've heard of that, but I can see that it's just like alcohol. When the person gets drunk, you know, they say things because they don't have the filter, right? They don't have that filter anymore. And so, what alcohol does is it kind of opens up also, certain channels. And a lot of times you're hearing the demonic forces coming from a person who's drunk. They'll say things that usually they wouldn't say. Sometimes very evil, some very mean things. Right? What misguided shaitan among these four? All of them, right? All of them. But at the root of it, at the root of his misguidance is conceit. And conceit is the seed of all of these other qualities, which is what? Conceit is what? I see. The word for conceit in Arabic is ujub. And ujub is from the same root as the word ajib, which I know in Urdu means strange, but in Arabic, ajib means to be amazed. And so a person that's conceited is actually amazed with themselves. They have some quality, some attribute. Again, it could be beauty, it could be knowledge, it could be their religiosity, their faith, their power, their influence, their money. And they're impressed with themselves. Like they say in street vernacular, they feel themselves, right? They're feeling themselves, right? And so when a person starts to feel themselves or be impressed with themselves, it leads to all kinds of other vices. It leads to arrogance. It leads to showing off because you're impressed with yourself and you think other people should be impressed with you, right? It leads to anger, right? Now you think you're entitled, and at the root of anger that's not for God's pleasure is entitlement. Like you're not content with the way God has created a particular situation or environment, and so you're not happy because it's not, things aren't going your way. Yeah. And that's even with your own children, right? Children are a big test of all of these. So at the root of Satan's misguidance is his conceit, right? He was a very devout jinn. He was among those angels and jinn that came and, came to the earth. And because there were jinn that lived on the earth before us, before human beings were here. And they had, their tribes and their nations, and they corrupted the earth. This is why the angels, some of the scholars say, the angels say to God, why are you creating, would you create one who would spill blood and sow corruption in the earth? Because they'd already seen what the jinn had done, that they just got finished cleaning house, right? But Iblis, God protect us from him, was among those, angels and jinn that came to clean house, right? So he was, again, he was like very respected. And when God says he's creating a vicegerent, a representative in the earth, the place in the earth, he's hoping it's him. He wants that position. He thinks he's qualified. But Allah gives it to a new creature who didn't earn it? I mean, who is he? He hasn't done 40,000 years of worship. He didn't go in, with the armies of angels and jinn and, purify the earth of their corruption. But what is this Adam, what has this human done to deserve khilafah? And this is what Iblis didn't understand. That Allah gave human beings this station out of love, not because he earned it, out of love, right? And Iblis doesn't get that. He doesn't understand that. It's out of love. It's a gift. Yeah, he didn't do anything to deserve it. That's the whole point. He didn't do anything to deserve it. That's why it's a manifestation of God's mercy and compassion. We haven't done anything to deserve it. And so when someone gives you something that's precious and valuable, and what is more precious and valuable than being a human being in the created world? Nothing. Nothing. Right? If someone would ask you, give me a price tag for your life, what would that be? $1 million, $1 billion, $1 trillion? Nothing. Right? So Allah's giving you something so valuable, so precious, for absolutely doing nothing to earn it. And when you recognize that and you internalize that, how do you respond except with gratitude? And not only that, with empathy for others. How could you not now, and maybe some of you heard me pray for Trump and you're like, what? This guy's praying for Trump, Sufi guy. Right? Allah sent Moses and Aaron, peace be upon, to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh was, trust me, much worse than Trump. And Allah Ta'ala says, speak gentle words to him in order that he remember. We talked about remembering, right? Or fear God, show awe of God, right? So, this is our tradition, and this is what the Quran teaches. So if you recognize that, then you should find it within yourself to show compassion and sympathy and empathy for people that don't deserve it, because God gave you this valuable life, human life, that has limitless potential. I mean, I don't know if we really understand what that means. You as a human being have limitless potential. The only limits you have are the limits you place on yourself, right? Really, the only limits you have are the limits you place on yourself. There's really nothing you cannot do. There is nothing you cannot do as a human being, as long as it does not violate the commandments of God and it does not violate the rights of others. Other than that, you can do whatever you want, right? With that mind, that soul, that spirit, that body that God's given you. So that's why gratitude, and what does Satan say in the Quran? He says, I will show you that you won't find them to be grateful. Like, that's the main thing. He said, I'll show you, they won't be grateful. And it's sad, but so many human beings are not grateful. Not all of us, though. Alhamdulillah, may Allah make us grateful. Really, it's a good practice to do salatul shukr, the prayer of gratitude. Like, pray 2 rakats out of gratitude every day. Like, pray salatul shukr every day. What does it mean when you do not recall your dreams? You dreamt something but cannot recall what the dream was about. So, I heard Sheikh Fode Drame, one of my beloved teachers and spiritual mentors. He said that that's usually, I'm underscoring the word usually, a sign of some blockage, some spiritual blockage. What happens when you dream, or what should happen when you dream, right, is your soul travels. Then this is again based on a saying of Prophet Muhammad, God bless him and grant him peace. Your soul travels beyond time and space to the throne of God and spends the night in chandeliers. He describes them as lamps, masabih, right? Or qanadil, right? No, masabih, lamps that are hanging under the throne of God. And the throne of God, of course, is the largest of all of God's creatures in size. So there's room for all of us, right? Right. The potential that this is every human being should, their soul should go to this incredible, beautiful, blissful place when you sleep. The souls are meant to go and spend the night in these lamps that are hanging from the throne of God, right? That's where we're supposed to spend our sleep. And in that place you find angels and prophets and, you know, all kinds of exalted beings, right? That you can learn from and interact with. But and then the soul also is blessed to either travel to the past or to the future, right? And to bring back knowledge that upon waking, if remembered, right? Your question is about forgetting. If remembered, can now be used as guidance for yourself or for your family, you know, inspiration, you know, for your community. How many scientists, how many artists, you know, how many entrepreneurs have gotten their best ideas, you know, through a dream, right? To solve problems, world problems, right? Family problems. And I'm sure that's happened to many of you, right? So that's ideally what's supposed to happen when you dream. Throne of God, you go to the past, you go to the future, you get knowledge, and you bring it back to this world, this dimension, and you use it. Right? You use it to, you know, make life better here. That's what this is about, right? But what happens is if you're not living a life, again, that's modeled on the Quran, right? So you're going beyond being a Muslim, like a lip service Muslim, to like really internalizing the message, like studying the Quran and really, you know, doing what you can to live it. Not trying to be perfect. As I said earlier, we're not here to be perfect, right? We make mistakes, we have shortcomings, and that's why God's grace is so important for us as human beings. But if you're not even making that effort, right, and you're hurting people, you know, you're living a self-centered life, maybe, and or you're not. Maybe you're a nice person, you're a good person, but you're not, you know, in remembrance of God throughout your day, right? A person who's not in remembrance of God, Prophet Muhammad said, is dead. They're like they're like the Walking Dead, right? Like the series, you know. They're literally like a zombie, right? They're physically alive, but spiritually they're dead. They flatlined until they start remembering God. Okay. And as I said earlier, if you don't remember God, it makes you vulnerable to Satan and his whispering. So if you're not remembering your dreams, Sheikh Fode said, it's a sign that, you know, wherever your soul goes, and if you're not living that life of a sacred spiritual life during the day, during your waking hours, your soul doesn't go to the throne. You know, we talked about this in an earlier class. Your soul is actually prevented from rising to its potential, and it's kept in the psychic, the realm of the nafs, right? The dimensions of the nafs and the mundane physical realms, right? You're limited, you're constricted. And this happens to people when they die as well, right? If they die and they didn't live lives of, you know, virtue and faith, it's you know, it's possible that after death, again, they're limited in where their soul can go. But if they did live lives of faith and virtue, um, they live very free in the next dimension, in the hereafter. You know, and the prophets are the freest. They can go wherever they want in the spiritual realms, and they can connect with people in this world as well. So how do you, you know, get past the blockage? That's where the spiritual guide comes in. A true spiritual guide can help you identify what is it that you might be doing in your life that is causing your soul, first of all, to not rise? And then secondly, when your soul comes back to your body, when you wake up from sleep, why is it that it's not able to transfer knowledge, to kind of, download, if you want to use a IT term, right? You can't download that knowledge. And also, it's important before you go to bed at night to go to bed in a state of wudu, and this, having made your ablutions, your cleansing, the lustration. And even if you're a woman who's on her monthly cycle, I know some women scholars that even suggest that women should still make wudu before they go to bed, right? As a protection from jinn and satanic forces. Go to bed with dhikr of God on your lips, right? And reciting some of the prayers for sleep, going to sleep, that Prophet Muhammad used to recite. And there's a very simple one. He used to say, Bismika Allahumma amut wa ahya. In your name, O God, through all your names, I die and I live, because sleep is like a little death. And there's so many other prayers he used to say when he would go to sleep, and he would remember God when he would go to sleep. And if you do that, hopefully that will help, right? With you remembering your dreams. I know people who used to not remember their dreams, and by keeping company with spiritual guides, they gradually start to become more aware of that. You are still dreaming, so to speak, but if you can't remember them, you need to seek out good company. And mashallah, thank God that there are lots of people like that, and the spiritual guide, you may not always be someone who's famous or who's on the stage. The spiritual guide might be your own mother, right? It might be a neighbor, it might be one of your children, right? So you're just looking for people of faith and virtue that you can keep company with. My father has been prescribed psychedelics by a psychiatrist after a head injury. Ketamine, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Takes it once a month. It has some positive effect. Allah knows best. My father is in hospital now. Please pray he's led to dhikrullah. I mean, with that intention, man, for healing and for being led to remembrance of God. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah. Ameen. What about people who sleepwalk? Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about sleepwalking. I watched a documentary about it. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I know that there's physiological issues there. There's psychological issues there. Um, I don't know if there's a spiritual uh, issue or uh, but I mean the spirit's connected to everything. But it's an interesting phenomena. It could be potentially dangerous for people, right, who sleepwalk, right? They can hurt themselves. Um, I watched a really good documentary on sleepwalking that it escapes me right now, like what the main idea was. But they noticed a trend or a pattern in people who sleepwalk. And I forget what it was, but I'm sure you can find it online. Yeah, so. But, I'm not a sleep scientist or a sleep doctor, so. But it is fascinating, or sleep is fascinating, and we really don't know about it. In fact, scientists confess that they really don't know why we sleep, right? Um, so, alhamdulillah. Thank you all. May Allah bless you. I know it's a work day, another work day, and so I hope you have productive days at work with your families. And, this was a heavy lesson, but very important. And this actually brings us to the end of talking about the obstacles. Tomorrow, God willing, we're going to be speaking about the helpers, like who are the helpers on your path, on your journey. And we're going to be speaking about spiritual guides and, spiritual teachers. And we will follow that with some practical practical disciplines for your spiritual journey. And so I really want this to be something that you can apply to your life. We've dealt with a lot of theory, I think, that was important. So we're just going to deal with a few more sections that deal with, again, teachers and, spiritual guides, spiritual helpers, because that's really important. And then we'll deal with some practical things. We only have about 10 or 11 days left of Ramadan, so, this is the time, like Usain Bolt, right, from Jamaica, when he gets about, 30 yards from the finish line, he doesn't slow down. So imagine like Ramadan is a race, and it is a race, actually. It's a sprint. It is a sprint. It's not a marathon. It is a sprint. It's 29 or 30 days. Ayamin ma'dudat, God says, like limited days. And so this is not the time to do less, right? This is the time to do more. Like Usain Bolt, he speeds up as he gets close to the finish line, and he lunges forward, right? And he, sometimes you even see him like looking back at his opponents, the other competitors, smiling, like he's got a grin on his face as he's, right? Like, about to go across the ribbon. So, brothers and sisters, the ribbon is in sight. God has blessed us with another Ramadan. You don't know if you're going to see another Ramadan. You don't know. There's no guarantee. I pray that we see many, many more decades of Ramadans. And, you should make the intention, I do, that if Allah Ta'ala were to give me life to the day of judgment, I would fast every Ramadan. Like, make that intention. I would fast every Ramadan. Like, make that intention to the day of judgment, But you don't know if you're going to be here for another year. So this might, this could very well be our last 10, 11 days of Ramadan ever. If whatever, if you were reciting one juz of Quran a day, now it's time to recite 2 or 3 or 4. If you are listening to one juz, listen to more, right? If you were, giving, a little charity or some zakat, give more, right? Give more. Help around the house more. Help your spouse. Help your children. Be more loving. Control your anger, your temper more. Whatever good you've been doing the past almost 20 days, now is the time to go in the 6th gear, right? And finish Ramadan with, strongly. Prophet Muhammad, God bless him and grant him peace, said, seek out the night of destiny, Laylatul Qadr, in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. And if you were weak, or you found yourself unable of giving the first part of Ramadan its due, then don't let the last 7 days of Ramadan overcome you. So there's still hope. If you weren't really proud of, how you, what you did, if you didn't meet your goals, don't feel despair. Don't be despondent. You still have time, inshallah. So may Allah Ta'ala give us all success. Yes. During the last 10 days, will there still be the chat portion, or will that violate itikaf? No. We'll still have the chat portion. It's not a problem. Alhamdulillah. No, thank you, my brother, my beloved brother. May Allah protect you as well, ennoble you and your family. MashaAllah. Let's close with the dua. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wa sallallahu nabiyyika kareem wa alihi wa sallam. Oh Allah, we ask that you make this last part of Ramadan more successful for us in gaining nearness to you, and more blessed for us than the first part of Ramadan. Ya Allah, make us from those who receive your mercy and your love and your forgiveness and salvation from the fire, Ya Allah, in these last days of Ramadan. Ya Allah, help us to be better human beings. Help us to strive, Ya Allah, strive, 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 Ya Allah. Ya Allah, in these last days of Ramadan, oh Allah, bring us together in love, in solidarity with one another. Help us to be servants of those who are weak and those who are in need, of those who are oppressed, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Help us to use our resources to bring to bring uh, uh, relief to others, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Oh Allah, we pray for the father of our brother who is facing these mental health issues. We ask that you give him healing, Ya Allah, and that you plant his feet and his heart firmly on your remembrance, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Oh Allah, we pray for Imam Suhaib Sultan, our brother and our friend. We ask that you grant him healing, complete healing, Ya Allah, and that you connect him and that you grant him the skills and the resources of the best physicians to help him. And we pray for all of our sick, that you grant them healing, and our deceased ones, that you give them mercy. Those who are wrongfully imprisoned, like Imam Jamil Alameen, Ya Allah, Mumi Abu Jamal, Ya Allah, and that you give them freedom, and so many other political prisoners, Ya Allah, that you give them freedom. Oh Allah, we ask that you alleviate the suffering of those that are suffering, those that are innocently suffering. Ya Allah, make us and our resources a means by which their pain and suffering is alleviated, Ya Rabbal Alameen. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. آمين 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 آمين. الحمد لله.